Shalom, first and foremost, like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash, double honors, the elders and apostles, great millstone, who are teaching this truth in sincerity, and a shout out to Yakims out there in four quarters of the earth proclaiming this truth. Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash, Brakatum. So out here, at the end of another week, Babylon the Great in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and of course, like everything else, so, now all the experts are saying the same thing. What are you thinking about escalating to the next level? Because we already know that Babylon the Great has officially ran out of reserve stockpiles, and eventually, they're saying somewhere in the middle of August that you're going to start to see shortages at the pumps. Now, you've seen some of it in Florida and other places, but you're going to see even more shortages, right? Because this is a worldwide global shortage. It's all being done on purpose, of course, to bring in the new world order, which is ultimately to have everything controlled. Bringing everybody into the AI control grid, because everybody's got to become reliant upon AI. And of course, AI taking over all the jobs over here because they're going to send everybody to die in the war. Ultimately, and the NDAA has already passed, merging the U.S. military with the Israeli military, the least of the flock. So, officially, U.S. serves Israel. That's official. And like everything else, so, those that don't want to fight for Israel, it's too late. Greater Israel is America now. You lost it. You thought that this was a free, independent state. No, it was nothing more than a Zionist regime. The Zionist regime controls Babylon. It always has. It even controlled Babylon even before they thought they was a free, independent state. They've been controlling this for quite some time. The bankers, they had a plan. These unelected officials had a plan. And we're in the midst of that plan. So, pretty much so. Trump getting what he wants to. And, well, they're talking about this, right? This is the talk of the evening, the major escalation.
Staged across the Middle East, and bomber aircraft at bases in the U.S. and U.K. are on high alert to ramp up operations. So what has been transpiring over the past week? If you've been paying attention to the movement of military assets, then you're probably on top of this already. And it does signal that this war is about to escalate. So in the past week, Special Operations Forces have deployed to the region from their U.S. bases, and that's according to flight tracking data and the U.S. officials who spoke to the Wall Street Journal. Squadrons of jet fighters have been staged across the Middle East, and bomber aircraft at bases in the U.S. and U.K. are on high alert, again, to ramp up operations, according to one of the officials. Ramp up operations. There is an official tied to the White House who spoke to the Wall Street Journal and specifically said, we're going to ramp up operations. But here's the problem. Ramping up operations doesn't accomplish anything because there really isn't a military option to end this war. If there were a military option, President Donald Trump would have already deployed that military option. And if you're under the impression that pulverizing Iran will bring the IRGC to its knees, I think you're sadly mistaken.
But, most people listen to Fox News tell you that, right? This war is going to be over in 2 or 3 weeks, right? But yet, it lasted 2 months, and now you're back again. It's already the second week, right, of intensified military operations, right? So that way they can bring them to their knees and bring them back to the negotiating table, but Trump doesn't want to deal with them because they're scum, right? That's the rhetoric that's coming out of D.C. and Fox News, is that, we're not going to deal with them, they're scum, but yeah, they're begging me for a deal. Really? Because they already knew that you was going to do what you did anyways. And guess what? They've been hitting more precise, More people have been killed in the retaliatory strikes this time. And unlike everything else, though, Kuwait desalination plants were also hit. So it's tit for tat, an eye for an eye. And the Houthis have entered the fight, right? Because Saudi Arabia thought they would do a preemptive strike against Sahana Airport. So guess what? Retaliations happened. Now the Banab Strait is closed. Now all this is being done on purpose, of course, to shut down oil. So that way they can shut down the grid. Because, of course, like everything else, so you have to end the petrodollar system, which is the U.S. dollar. So that has to end in order to usher in a new system, right? A new digital dollar, a stable coin. So that's all happening. And like everything else, though, You know, they're ushering in the MOTB. They're going to eventually mandate it. You know, we sound like a broken record with this. Then, of course, you have other things that have passed, like Bill C-34 in Canada, which makes it pretty much everything you say and post, well, you have to do age verification, just like you do in the UK, you know, so that way they can monitor your every movement. So pretty much so, you know, that's ushering in a famine of the word, where we're not going to give you the warnings anymore. Things are about to happen, and we're not there to warn you anymore, you know, because, you know, I don't know what GMS Toronto can do right now. For right now, I believe they're still out there and they're still doing videos. But you know, we have camps in Canada, right? You know, we have camps in the UK. But you know, we're limited to how much we can get on and how we get on, because of course they make it you have to do age verification for VPN, so there's no anonymity. You know, they snuck that in there. Anonymity, meaning you're you know, being able to free surf the internet. Not to mention, you know, if anybody in Canada wants to watch us, right, you know, they have to do age verification just to watch our videos. So that's a famine of the word right there, you know, both ways. You know, not only can we not even post videos, but you can't even look at videos, you know, so you can't look at videos in those areas. And of course they plan to bring it in through the digital ID, you know, to where you have to verify for everything, right? You have to have this VeriChip, you know, ultimately, which the whole world is going to have the RFID system. That's what they're doing, is they're setting up the system while you got the crisis going on, right? The global oil, energy, infrastructure crisis. And of course, fertilizer shortages and just worldwide shortages everywhere, you know? So pretty much so, you will find that your storehouses are going to be empty, you know, and all hell's going to break loose. We ain't going to even be there warning you when it's happening, because it's already happening, so there's no need to warn you, but we told you beforehand, right? Then you'll know a prophet had been among you. So the time for us, they're eventually going to have these laws over here. It's going to be a one world government, you know, where there won't be any individual governments. It'll all be in a new world order. You know, the king of Babylon will merge everything, because you can see that pretty much so he's with the NDAA Act. So the Israeli state officially controls, that's why we said it's the Israeli States of America. Basically meaning that governed by the small hats. You already know that they were here before. See, Tucker Carlson, you know, he already knows, because he's already seen our camps before. He already knows that these small hats control everything, you know, and that America lost its sovereignty long ago. It's not a free individual state. It's not a sovereign state anymore. It's a Zionist state. Zionism rules Babylon the Great. So basically, you know, if you're enlisted in the military, you're fighting for the Zionists. You're fighting for the Zionist New World Order, because that's how they're going to usher it in. And like everything else, though, Iran has already said in response to the recent actions against Qasem Island and Karg Island, you know, about these latest operations, if we cannot sell our oil, you will not be able to sell your oil either. So, you know, there's this secret ground movements. It's not so secret because, again, you know, they already know that about the plans to send ground troops in. They're waiting for ground troops to actually enter in there. But what the U.S. has been doing is cutting off communications, shooting down radar centers. And guess what? Iran has been doing the same, shooting down all the radar centers too. And also hitting fiber optic cables that control the internet over there, destroying their cables. So eventually communication will be cut off from there, right? You know, and now all of a sudden you can't get presstv.ir because they don't have a so-called certificate, right? If you try to look for news articles there, you know, still have a Facebook page, but you know, how much more? Well, the Zionists control the information, and they're losing that information war. Clinton was famous for saying it. We're in an information war, and we're losing that war, you know, because they can't control the narrative anymore. Their narrative is falling apart. Well, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, but Saudi Arabia can enrich uranium. Well, now all of a sudden he's backpedaled that. Oh, but they could do that as long as they sign the, there's a special act there, Abraham Accords, yeah. As long as they sign the Abraham Accords. So Trump did actually do a pullback hand with that. But still, at the same time, the hypocrisy that Saudi Arabia can have enriched uranium, can build a nuclear weapon, but Iran cannot. You know, you see the hypocrisy there. It's because Iran also will not sign the Abraham Accords. But like everything else, though, you know, these ICBMs, Russia has them, and they can arm them with nuclear warheads. So you can see where we're at the beginning stages of Russia entering into the war. especially with all these communications being cut, right? Somebody's got to provide Iran with intelligence. So Gog and Magog's about to enter the battle, and we've been telling you about this for some time. It's a mountain of troops that's about to come in. Now, like everything else, so, you know, we also know that the Most High is speeding things up for the elect's sake, right? You know? So we ain't got much more time at this, right? You know? We can see that everything is moving fast, you know? As we're in the second half of the year, right? We're in July, and we're nearing August, and so depletion stockpiles, well, the global energy stockpiles, oil infrastructure stockpiles are all being depleted, right? So that means that it's going to be gas shortages everywhere. It's already happening in Russia as well. So, you know, pretty much so the ability to get in your cars and drive anywhere, well, you're going to be spending 4 or 5 hours at the gas station just to get enough gas just to get by. You ain't going to even be able to afford to go to your job. That's why they have AI robots recording your every move. Yeah, people have to wear body cams so that way the robots can learn your jobs, because you're going to be going and fighting a war. You know, they're looking for everybody small and great to go and fight this war, while they have factory workers already run by AI. So, like everything else, so the mirth is gone. You know, they've already determined that, well, we're going to renumber the whole earth to 500 million, the Georgia Guidestones. So, well, what better way than to send them off to war, to go and fight a never-ending battle? And that's just it. The war never ends. There was never an exit strategy. The idea was World War III, the third world war that cometh quickly. So, you know, well, what have we been telling you for a long time? We've been telling you this forever, right? You know, we sound like a broken record, day in, day out, week in, week out. We go out, we teach, and then we do in-home lessons on the subjects. The MOTB, and of course the New World Order and World War III. We're constantly doing videos on all these things. So, you know, you can't say that we weren't out here warning. You can't say that, you know, we weren't getting our house prepared, right? So, when it all comes, it shouldn't come as a surprise, but it's still going to catch many off guard. They're not going to be ready for this, you know. See, like everything else, though, you know, they took it for granted that, oh, well, that'll never happen in our time, but yet it is happening, right? Revelation chapter 16 and verse 16, and they gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon, which is the mountain of troops. And where's that mountain of troops? That's right there in West Asia. And the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, it is done. What's that talking about? That's when Yahushua shows up in the midst of World War III. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake by way of the nuclear destruction, such as never was since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. So, you know, that's talking about ultimately when Babylon is destroyed. And that great city was divided into 3 parts by way of the missiles hitting, right? And the cities of the nations fell, and great tribulation, great Babylon came in remembrance before Yahweh to give unto her the cup of wine of the fierceness of his wrath. You know, so ultimately, you know, this cup of wrath of his indignation is the ultimate punishment for taking the MOTB over here in Babylon, because Babylon ultimately is going to be the main one destroyed. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. So great, you know, that great and terrible day of the Lord Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, is coming to Babylon as they get sucked into this war, because now you can officially call it the Israeli States of Babylon, because with this new NDAA Act, it merges the militaries together. So that means that officially, Israeli state doesn't have to put their soldiers on the line. No, Babylon has to put their soldiers on the line for greater Israel. It's always been about greater Israel. It's about the oil, you see, to control all those oil states. And pretty much they're about to destroy all those places, you know, because at the end of the day, it's really about bringing in a new world order. And that's what they have. You know, we have before us a chance to merge a new world order. Remember, George Bush said that after taking down Saddam Hussein, which Saddam Hussein was the original choice to run Iran. But Saddam Hussein didn't do it, so they, you know, pretty much took down Saddam Hussein, you know, over the so-called invasion of Kuwait. Well, guess what? Kuwait's about to fall again. Yeah, Why? Because Iran wiped out just about everything, so Kuwait can't even defend itself. The emirs of Kuwait cannot do anything anymore, so guess what? Either Saudi Arabia or Iraq takes it over. Well, wouldn't that be interesting if Iraq took it? You know, because isn't that the whole reason for Desert Storm anyway? See, it's a war that never ends. It just keeps going on and on and on. But make no mistake, it does have an end, and Babylon the Great does get destroyed. So we've been warning you week in and week out, you know, going out into the city and proclaiming this place. Death is coming to Babylon, and great miseries are upon this place. You know, so how much more do we have to say, right? You know, because, man, you know, you just look at everything, you can see that, okay, when was this place ever great, right? You mean in the 1900s, when it first was building its industries? Well, who do these factory workers belong to now? Mr. Roboto is taking over everything, right? The secret's under their skin, you know? Everybody's going to be implanted with a micro C hip. You know, the ones that are left over here. The ones that don't fight the war. Oh, but the ones that fight the war will also be implanted. See, they have a plan to implant everybody with a micro C hip, you know? And no other camps are taking this on or even trying to warn you about that, right? That's an RFID implant. Nor are they warning you about the consequences of getting it, right? Which is when America is destroyed, you get destroyed right along with it. That's a copper wrath of his indignation, as spoken of. You see, all this is about to come to pass. And we've been warning day in and day out about this impending, and that Babylon the Great ultimately is going to be destroyed. Right now it's destroyed economically. It doesn't have the reserve dollar for sure. You know, it's not worth anything if they can't sell the oil, if nobody has the oil. So they did that on purpose. And of course, this is frozen. It's not reading. Slovakia. Yeah, it doesn't want to read. Oh well, I could just tell you word for word what it says, right? You know, and the third angel went out with a great voice, you know, and they're ultimately saying Babylon the Great has fallen. And the other angel, I'm trying to get, went out and, you know, and had warned, you know, that, okay, I don't have it in front of me. You know, but the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of his fornication, right? Cup of wrath of his indignation, right? You know, ultimately. You know, and shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Again, I'm just going by what I cannot see, but I have memorized. Revelation chapter 14, verse 8. You know? So you take that MOTB, you take that RFID, guess what? You're going to be caught up in the judgment coming to Babylon. Ultimately, when Yahweh Shai and the angels return here, and this place is destroyed by nuclear fire, and also by the fire coming from the chariots, the cup of wrath of his indignation, and shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. You know? So like everything else, though, we warn you about what's coming. You know? So when it comes, you can't say a prophet hadn't been among you. And look at everything that they're doing to usher it in. Things are going to speed up, you know. So hopefully this has been edifying. For that I want to say, Barakah the Yahweh, Barakah the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash, Wa Abal Babal, Barakathum, Jehovah elect, Shalom. Keep watching, man. Things are picking up really quick. Shalom.